You know what, it's been a long time since I've actually wanted to spend this much time with a affordable/budget phone, but the POCO F3 kind of redefines what you can expect to get for this kind of money. So I've spent the best part of the last month with this in my pocket. I didn't want to rush out a quick review as this is something special. And in my opinion at least, it's the best phone you can buy right now for around £330 or €350. So why is the F3 so special? Well, keep that price in mind, and we're getting a 120Hz AMOLED screen, the brand new Snapdragon 870G processor, which supports 5G, and in terms of performance is only just behind the flagship 888 that you get in phones that cost 2 or 3 times as much. We get great battery life, a solid triple camera setup, and an impressively sleek design. This is just 7.8mm thick, and also we get this lovely white satiny look to the Gorilla Glass 5 body. And together with the 360Hz touch sampling and that 120Hz refresh rate, it's an incredibly responsive phone, particularly in games. And also the fact that we get stabilized 4K video, whereas usually at this price range, it's only smooth at 1080p. It is genuinely, as the title says, an exceptional phone, but nothing's perfect, and there are still a few compromises with this. For example, the camera setup isn't the best in the world, and actually the IMX582 sensor on the main lens is a couple of years old now. We also don't get any kind of IP water resistance rating, and also the lack of micro SD card support and the fact that there's no 3.5mm headphone jack are a bit disappointing. Although POCO do bundle a 3.5mm to USB-C adapter in the box, along with the 33-watt fast charger. There's also a whole bunch of pre-installed apps, aka bloatware, which you'll probably want to remove or hide into folders, but aside from that, I think the MIUI 12 software on top of Android 11 is nice to use, and there's tons of customization. But you have to keep reminding yourself this costs just £330 or thereabouts, which is in the same ballpark as something like the new Nokia X20, this is about £300, and this actually comes with a 60Hz LCD screen and a much lower power Snapdragon 480 processor, again similar price. Or you've got the new Realme 8 Pro, which does cost about £60 less, so it's a little bit cheaper, but there's no 5G. We have a pretty old and slow Snapdragon 720G processor, it's still only 60Hz as well, and also this slightly questionable design, which I'm not really a huge fan of, but it's a little bit less, I guess. So yes, this is a little bit more expensive, but you're getting a lot more for your money. But speaking of the processor, because this is actually one of the more interesting specs on the F3, and it's slightly frustrating that POCO and Xiaomi actually block the use of benchmarks on some phones. So on this, Geekbench 5 crashes before it completes, and it doesn't even let me download benchmarks in 3D Mark. But still, what I do know is the Snapdragon 870G chip is essentially an overclocked version of last year's 865 Plus. It's about 10% faster. So what it means is that this is faster than most of last year's flagship phones, and together with that 120Hz refresh, it's incredibly fast, and it comfortably maxes out games that support the higher refresh. So don't let this stylish, thin and light design fool you. This is one of the best mid to high-end gaming phones you can buy. Even more so than the traditionally more gaming-oriented POCO X3 Pro. Now to be fair, this is about £50 cheaper than the F3, plus you get a bigger battery, micro SD and a headphone jack, as well as tougher Gorilla Glass 6 and some basic IP53 water resistance. So the X3 Pro is still worth considering, but I would definitely pay the extra to get the F3, which gets you 5G, an AMOLED rather than LCD screen, a faster Snapdragon 870 rather than the 860, and it's also 1.5mm thinner and about 20 grams lighter. Anyway, back to the F3, and I want to talk to you guys about this camera because it's good, but in what is otherwise an incredible phone, I do feel like the camera maybe is one of the more mediocre features. It's a triple lens setup with a 48 megapixel main, along with an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and a third 5 megapixel macro lens, so by default we get pixel binned 12 megapixel photos, and on the face of it, photos look sharp with a good amount of detail, although if you do look a little closer, fine detail often looks a bit over-processed, either unnaturally sharp or quite soft and blurry. This seems to be particularly true in portraits. Her face kind of lacks detail and looks a bit artificial. So in some respects, the F3 actually falls behind cheaper phones like the Redmi Note 10 Pro or the Realme Pro 8 that actually have higher 108 megapixel resolution cameras. But to its credit, the F3 does offer some impressive dynamic range, and throughout the colors are accurate and true to life. You can also digitally zoom in, 2 times, 5 times, or 10 times are the standard options. And 2 times is fine, but beyond that, it's a bit of a mess since we don't have a proper telephoto lens or any kind of lossless zoom that we might get on a 108 megapixel phone. But it does seem to struggle in low light, even when I'm using night mode. It doesn't make that much of a difference, colors are still a bit unnatural, and it just doesn't get that bright. Selfies do look good though, even accurately representing my purpley hay fever ridden eyes, and on the whole, I think the selfie camera is better than I expected. And finally, when it comes to video, you can shoot in up to 4K 30 or 1080p 60 up front. But as I mentioned earlier, it is impressive that we're getting stabilized 4K video on a phone for this money. For example, the Redmi Note 10 Pro is a shaky mess at 4K. So the camera is good, but there's nothing really to write home about, and it would have been good to see maybe a 108 megapixel sensor like we get on the Note 10 Pro, but it's absolutely fine. What I was surprised about though is the battery life. It's actually very good. The 4520 mAh cell is a good size, although it's not the biggest, and it's about 500 less than the POCO X3 Pro or the Redmi Note 10 Pro. But still, after 10 hours of YouTube at 50% brightness, the F3 still had 30% of its life remaining. And if you do keep it at 120Hz like I do, it will automatically switch between 60, 90 and 120, depending on what you're doing to save battery. So I wouldn't say it's best in class battery, but it's definitely above average and will comfortably get you over a day. So that's the F3. Fantastic design, great battery life, really good performance with that Snapdragon 870G chip, 5G, good camera if not the best in the world, and overall just a really good package. As I say, for an affordable / budget phone, it's a shame we don't have a headphone jack or micro SD, and it would have been good to maybe get that higher resolution camera option as well. But for £330, if you want a premium, affordable phone with 5G as well, I don't think there's a better option than this. Which is saying something because there are about 1 billion really good budget phones at the moment, and if you do want to spend a little bit less, then I would go with the Redmi Note 10 Pro. But what do you reckon? Would you be tempted to buy this? And if not, why not? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you've got any questions about this at all, let me know, and I'll see you guys next time right here on the Tech Chat. Thanks for watching.